Genie Oil Investigation Part 8. Throughout the 1980s, while the CIA was using the Muslim Brotherhood to create disorder in Sudan, they were also using Islamic agents in other parts of the world. For example, the CIA was using the Afghan Mujahideen and Afghan mercenaries that they were being shipped in from all these various Arab countries to fight against the Soviets. And of course, there was the filthy rich Saudi national named Osama bin Laden, who was working in Afghanistan as an asset for the CIA. Now, since I'll be talking a lot about CIA assets in the next couple of videos, I want to clarify what I mean when I say CIA asset. In the intelligence world, an asset is a person within an organization or a country who helps that agency out in some way. So you've got intelligence officers who are assigned to keep up relationships with their assets. The network will spy on the asset, though, to keep an eye on them, often without the asset even knowing, because you want to make sure that he's not secretly working as a double agent for the other side. So sometimes the assets are referred to as agents, but that doesn't actually mean that they're employees of the intelligence agency. So, for example, Osama bin Laden, he was an asset, but he wasn't an agent for the CIA in that sense. Some assets work as nothing more than confidential informants, or CIs for short. And not all assets work for the intelligence agency for the same reasons. Some may go to work for a foreign government as a mole, trying to gain intel or somehow subvert the activities of that government. And you got some assets who don't even know they're being used, because an asset can be totally loyal to his own country or organization, but still unwittingly be providing an undercover agent with intel who's pumping him. Some assets know exactly what they're doing, though, because they've been offered a ton of money or some other significant perk. And the CIA pays very good money to people who are willing to betray their own governments or the groups that they are embedded in. So, for example, what ultimately brought down the resistance group, the citizens who were out at the Malheur Wildlife Refuge in Oregon last year, was an FBI asset named Mark McConnell. He, along with several others, were paid by the FBI to infiltrate Ammon Bundy's inner circle and win their trust and betray them. McConnell is the snitch who was driving the Jeep that carried Ammon and Ryan Bundy into a trap that had been set up by the FBI's elite HRT unit. And after Ammon was arrested, the FBI moved in on a lot of people, picked up dozens of people in raids. One of the people that I knew they were going to go after was Ammon's father, Cliven. Now that the FBI had assassinated the group's spokesman, who was Lavoy Finnegan, Cliven became the face of the resistance movement, and so it just made sense that the feds were going to try and go after him. So I participated in a number of meetings with the movement's leadership as they planned out what to do next. And I'll tell you, there were FBI assets embedded that were trying to set Cliven up. There was this one meeting we had late one night. It was either on the night of Lavoy's funeral or the next night. I don't remember. The feds had been harassing us big time that whole week. So I'm in this meeting with Cliven, and he's leading a discussion about how to resolve the impasse out in Oregon, because David Fry and 3 others were still out at the refuge. They're surrounded on all sides by the feds. And Cliven was working to figure out what to do about it. And I can tell you, Cliven is a truly good person. I spent a day with him and his family out on his ranch in Bunkerville. He's a hard worker. He's honest to a fault. He's got a deep love for God and for the U.S. Constitution, but he wasn't very strategic in his thinking. So I'm in this meeting with Cliven and other leaders who had assembled from around the country, and he's soliciting ideas on how to resolve this impasse. And I can tell you, that meeting had FBI moles in it. They were playing on Cliven's feelings to try and manipulate him into taking aggressive action, to try and bust Fry and the others out. There was one man present who had previously had a significant role out at the refuge. And I sat there thinking to myself, of all the people that the FBI should have picked up, if anybody, it was this guy. But while the FBI went around grabbing everybody associated with the refuge occupation, they left this guy totally alone. So I knew that the FBI had to be aware of what this man had been doing at the refuge. The fact that they had let this guy off the hook while rounding up all these others who hadn't done a single thing wrong, it raised a lot of red flags in my mind. And so you got this guy here openly trying to talk Cliven into personally requesting to let this guy go in, guns blazing, to get Fry and the others out. The man was talking about using retired special forces buddies of his to race in helicopters to extract Fry. And he wasn't joking. The guy was dead serious. And he had some henchmen with him who were backing this plan. So I couldn't be 100% certain, but to me it sure seemed like they were trying to entrap Cliven or get him to go along with some blatantly criminal plot. So I spoke up in the meeting and I told Cliven that no matter what, he needed to stay out of Oregon. I pled my case there. I explained how he was now the face of the movement and that the second he stepped foot in Oregon, they were going to snatch him up. But while Cliven never gave any kind of approval whatsoever to what this guy was saying, this crazy plan, he also said that he couldn't stand by and do nothing. So I did my best to persuade Cliven not to go out to the refuge, but he just wouldn't factor his own safety into the equation. He was very selfless in that way. I don't think he really understood how treacherous the feds could be, and sure enough, the second he stepped off the plane in Portland, the FBI grabbed him, took him into custody, and he's been sitting there in jail ever since. In fact, after his arrest, Rolling Stone magazine ran a story on the arrest, and the main photo that they used with the story was a picture of Cliven walking into Lavoie's funeral with me standing at his side. And I actually remember the moment that we were walking into the church for the service, because we had stopped for a minute to look up and watch this little small Cessna that the FBI had circling over the church. I just looped around for about 2 hours during the service. So I used my camera after it was over to get a shot of the plane, and I went and used some software to zoom in close enough to get the tail number on the plane and track it down. I actually spoke with the owner of the plane. The guy had been hired to fly it while the feds were capturing video and monitoring our communications during the funeral. I remember that night after the funeral, standing in a hotel room with a group of militia members while the feds kept taking control of our phones and disrupting communications. And I'm not exaggerating here. There were 4 of us standing there holding our phones in our hands as the feds would power these phones back on and activate all the apps or do something that kept heating up the phone so hot that it would drain the batteries in just a matter of minutes, so we couldn't use them. And while we were standing there talking about what was going on with our phones, there were others in the room who were using like the hard phone, the hard line, trying to talk with others in the militia because their social media accounts had simultaneously been hacked. The feds had locked them out of their accounts, and they were trying to figure out how to get back in. This is also the trip where the feds followed me out into the desert and hit my rental car multiple times with a mobile DEW, or I don't know if they call it a DEW. It's a directed energy weapon. It was scrambling my cell phone communication, kept hitting my rental car's electrical system to make it go haywire. And to this day, the feds still monitor my communications. I'm now having to buy my 3rd phone since last year because they keep frying my phones with their programs. They remotely turn on my phone after I've turned it off. I show this to people all the time. And by the way, Aaron, if you're watching this, I know you called me about a week ago for me to return a call, but these honkies fried my phone again back on the 14th, and I'm still trying to catch up on calls. So I'm guessing you might be calling about doing a radio show or something, but I haven't gotten my new phone in the mail yet. I'm using a burner phone right now in the meantime, but it's pretty rotten. So sorry about that, but I haven't forgotten you. So anyway, I was talking about assets. Some assets do the work because they're being blackmailed. That's very common, which is what the concern was over Trump's first NSA boss, Michael Flynn. Flynn wasn't being honest about his conversations that he had had with the Russians or about the past lobbying that he's done on behalf of the corrupt government in Turkey. So all that made him a potential target for blackmail, unless he agreed to work, as an asset for outside parties. And it was so important, that's why it was so important for Trump to go in and drain the swamp, at least in his administration, to the extent that he could, because he's in there surrounded by assets that are working for all kinds of outside interests. And since Trump didn't drain the swamp, he's now having to put out one fire after another after another. I think Trump's days are numbered. Either he plays ball, which he's actually already shown a willingness to do, or they're going to construct some scandal that will lead to his impeachment and removal if he doesn't go along with them. That's what Watergate was. Nixon had gone rogue, so the globalists used Henry Kissinger to manipulate Nixon psychologically, using Nixon's extreme distaste for public criticism. They used his ego against him to get him to take actions that made him look like a bigger crook than he actually was. Trump's ego is easily twice that of Nixon's, and ultimately that's going to be Trump's downfall. His ego is his Achilles heel. In any enterprise where your organization might be targeted by some intelligence group, you want your people to be men and women of true integrity. You want them to be genuinely good people at heart. People who have a lifetime of integrity and honesty, people who live by moral principles and who don't have skeletons in their closets. You want them because those are just about the only people that the intelligence spooks can't flip. I'll give you a quick example of such a person. One of my heroes in the world of geopolitics is this woman named Sibel Edmonds. She was born in Iran. Her father was Iranian and Azerbaijanian. Her mother was Turkish. So she lived in both Iran and Turkey before she moved to the USA. Sibel eventually was hired by the FBI immediately after 9/11 to go to work as a translator. So she had access to top secret intel and learned for herself that bin Laden was a CIA asset who had an intimate relation with the CIA all the way up until 9/11. So while she's working for the feds, a mole who was working for interests in Turkey was hired by the feds to work alongside Sibel. And this mole's husband also worked for the Defense Department. So one day they show up at Sibel's home and they offer her basically a lot of money if she'll turn against America. So she immediately reported the incident to her superiors. But the FBI ended up firing her and keeping the mole. So she tried going public as a whistleblower, and they gagged her. The ACLU calls Edmonds the most gagged woman in America. She's not even allowed to publicly reveal her own birthday. So my point here is Sibel was a patriot, someone with integrity who couldn't be flipped. That's the kind of person that Trump needs at his side, not an Israeli asset like Kushner. So in the next video, we're going to take a look at the role of bin Laden, how he worked as an asset for the CIA. Bin Laden is not the mastermind of a vast, well-polished terrorist network like the U.S. government wants you to believe. I'm going to try to open your eyes to the role that this guy really played. I'm not saying he's innocent. I'm not saying he wasn't a bad guy. He certainly was. But he played a very different role than the one that the Bush and Obama administrations have led us to believe. So we're going to talk about that next.